Well, my particular focus area is protected areas, which are those areas that are set aside by national governments and other bodies to conserve biodiversity and cultural resources, and which now exist in every single country in the world.
Um, the concern on protected areas has become more important than ever. Help us understand how critical it is for the livelihood of people.
Well, I suppose the first step is that systems of protected areas actually conserve ecosystems. So whether it's in the marine environment or the terrestrial environment or fresh water and so on. And so there are very specific land use which is governed and managed in a particular way to make sure that those ecosystem services and values actually last into the future. So, when you think about it, people have been doing this kind of work for centuries. A community might conserve a forest because of its water. People living on the coast might be looking after a coral reef because they depend on it for fisheries. So people are very, very closely dependent on biodiversity in natural ecosystems, and protected areas are one of the ways in which you can actually make sure that that lasts and that it works.
Tell us, what are the other benefits of protected areas? I mean, do people who are not exactly living in forests or depending on forest products, even those people benefit if protected, and they fetch direct benefits if there are more and more protected areas. So tell us about that.
Well, let's maybe take it back one little step in that people have established protected areas for a whole lot of different reasons. It might be, for example, a sacred mountain that's really important for cultural and spiritual values. Or they may have conserved a wetland because it has a functional value to store water, in times of drought. But there are those direct benefits that people can get by visiting, by using a product, and so on. More broadly, though, when you add this all up at a global level, we have, I'll give you, for example, climate change. The world absolutely depends on the carbon that is stored in forests, and the world's protected areas store carbon. So they're providing a service to the whole of the global population in mitigating the effects of climate change. So that's the kind of, there's that local issue, but there's also the global issue.
We hear of policies and regulations as far as forest protection is concerned, but we do not really see it effectively translating into practice. Tell us about the missing link between policy and practice.
Well, of course, it's probably all around capacity, right? It's about people understanding what they have to do and being able to do it properly. So we do have a very strong focus on developing capacity. So there are about 200,000 protected areas in the world, including those that look after forests. And the traditional kinds of things people need to know how to do is how to establish the area, how to involve local communities, how to set up a management plan and a monitoring program, how to conduct research. But some of these new challenges that the world faces, like dealing with climate change or increased disasters, they're starting to demand new kinds of capacity. So one of our jobs as a global community is to start looking at how to address those gaps and invest in that kind of capacity development.
I want to ask you, when there are policies and projects which target to bring more and more area under protection, the local businesses that depend on the forest land, they suffer. So what kind of resistance do people have to face, do governments have to face, and how challenging is the entire process, because the interests of all the stakeholders have to be taken care of?
No, that's absolutely true, and I think the history of protected area establishment, at least in some countries, has been pretty disastrous. In some cases, communities have looked after a resource for a long period of time, and then a government has stepped in and said, okay, well, we're taking over and we're responsible. And so there's that sense of restricted access to what people understood and were used to. So that's really something that should be in the past. It's something where now one has to really involve people, not just at the level of consultation, but actually participation. So recognizing that, for example, an indigenous community may be looking after that forest and has done so for centuries, knows how to do it. And so their role in it needs to be recognized, and what they can contribute from traditional knowledge and others actually taken into account. So there's definitely, I mean, in these decisions that are being taken here in the COP, we hear it again and again in every statement, the recognition of the role and the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities to be involved. And maybe we can get past, that kind of history that really wasn't very productive.